Hey YouTube, it's me again. How's it going? This is probably going to be a part one of this video. Most likely going to be part one because I just wanted to talk about 2020 so far, and it has only been 7 months into the year. This year isn't even over, and so much has already happened. I mean, there have been so many protests going around the whole nation, even in Portland, Oregon, right now, where military police are just throwing tear gas and using weapons to attack protesters and what have you. And the funny thing is, um, it's starting to unfold into anarchy before your very eyes. And and prior to that, COVID-19 sparked some panic amongst Americans by causing them to freak out and buy a whole bunch of toilet paper and even stealing toilet paper from other stores when they use the public restrooms. Like they steal, and people were even stealing toilet paper from public restrooms or restrooms for customers only. So, so you know, I'm not really laughing. I'm just amazed and with I have mixed feelings and emotions and kind of amazed by how this whole country has suddenly gone awry in the blink of an eye. And I think it's safe to assume that with everything that's going on, I mean, it has been very emotional. This has been a very emotional year for Americans, and this is probably the most emotional year Americans have had in a very, very long time. So, it's I mean, to be honest with you, this is probably the worst year for a lot of Americans because so many of them are out of jobs and they can't. Some of them need to have extra income to be able to afford their mortgage, to pay for their bills in the house, and when you're jobless and you don't have welfare checks coming in, then I mean, what can I tell you? It's going to be hard for Americans to scrounge up some money for themselves. And with that being said, I just think that it's a little hard for me. It's hard to believe that so much has already happened within this year, more so than everything that has happened. A lot more has happened this year than last year, and even the year before that. So we have COVID-19. It was a disease that plagued and spread all throughout the world like that. I mean, you have the George Floyd protests and so many other protests with Black Lives Matter and statues being destroyed and vandalized and cops being attacked and assaulted to the point where their heads are damn near busted open and they're bleeding from the head from the face all over. Uh, and there is also an election, and once again, the political climate is getting more toxic, and once again, this has become another emotional year for Americans, and I think that it's going to be so emotionally charged with the supporters of Donald Trump and Joe Biden. And it's bad enough that we have all these crazy protests going on where police officers are attacking protesters, especially the ones who are protesting peacefully, because they're not going after the rioters and the paid protesters, paid rioters and the paid protesters who are actually actors who are told and instructed to destroy property. They're not going after them. Military police, they're attacking those who are protesting peacefully. So, to me, it's a little strange how, you know, um, it's becoming politically charged. As it's almost like we're going back to the '60s and the '70s, especially during like the Richard Nixon protests and what have you. And that was a very politically charged time as well. National Guard in front of the school, very political, very emotionally charged. And the political climate is also very toxic. We're pretty much going back to that era in a way, mentally speaking, if I should say, and politically. The climate is starting to resemble the climate that you saw during the Richard Nixon protests and the protests that were going on during Little Rock, Arkansas, with National Guard standing up, posted up in front of the school back in those days. So it's like the 60s and 70s, to sum it up shortly. But we'll see what happens more throughout the end of the year. And by the end of the year, I would like to make a part two of this video, because it's funny how so much has happened within less than uh, 8 months in 2020, more so than what has happened in 12 months in 2018 and 2019 combined. So that tells you right there that this is a very emotional time for Americans, and it's a very tough time, probably the worst year for most Americans, to be honest with you. And to be honest with you, it's a little frustrating to me that that a lot of Americans seem to be a little bit defeatist, and they seem to have lost a lot of hope that that because there's this thing called COVID-19, they just think like, well, it's only going to get worse before it gets better, which is very defeatist, and that just means that you have given up. And on top of that, not only is there a battle of COVID-19, not only is there a war against is there a battle in biological warfare, but the protests that are going on, and rioters who are destroying monuments and statues to commemorate what's it called the profound effect that U.S. history has had in this country. And on top of that, we also have an election going on between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, who are, and of course, Americans are going to be so divided on their political beliefs, as usual, over a Democrat and a Republican, who are not only one and the same thing as far as political parties, but they're also the same thing as far as personalities as well. They both say some. Donald Trump tends to say dumb things that spew out of his mouth, and Joe Biden is no different. They say dumb things, stupid things that come out of their mouth. I mean, you can't help but just laugh at both of them. So just like my previous video, this is going to be watching a debate between those two subhuman rapists. It's going to be who just so happen to be very senile, by the way. This will be equivalent to watching a boxing match between two Alzheimer's patients in a retirement home, because the stuff they say is completely outrageous and asinine, and you can't help but just shake your head in disbelief that, did they really just say that? Because that's the first thing that comes to a lot of people's minds when they hear dumb things that come out of Donald Trump and Joe Biden's mouth. So with that being said, so much is going on right now, but I'll make a part two by the end of this year, and or maybe by the beginning of next year, so we'll see. Oh, and one more thing I'd like to add before I go. My prediction, Donald Trump will win and become president of the United States once again. So this is my prediction. But if I'm wrong, I will tell you that I was wrong. And in life, you expect the unexpected. Just keep that in mind. Anyway, tell me your thoughts. Take care, YouTube.